Hi, welcome to another episode of Warden Stories. My name is Darrin Hill. I'm a communication and education specialist here at the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation. And today, because of a really neat thing, I've got a good friend and coworker, Joe Alexander, one of our Northeast Oklahoma top tier game wardens, right?
Well, I don't know about that, but yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Good deal. So you came up here to the central office today because of a sort of a special, I think it's a special.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my name's Joe Alexander. I'm a Game Warden Supervisor stationed in Northeast Oklahoma, and had the privilege to come down this morning, and we had the Oklahoma Law Enforcement Memorial this morning in Oklahoma down by the DPS headquarters there. And if you've never seen that, I encourage everyone to go by and check that out. It's a very beautiful monument there for all the fallen Oklahoma officers. But this morning we inducted William Bill Pickens, which was a warden who passed away in the 80s after he was, I believe it was 1971, he was in a shootout that led to, him eventually losing his life to a battle of illness and whatnot that took almost 10 years. But yeah, we honored him this morning.
Bill Pickens.
Mm-hmm.
Now that almost sounds Oklahoma historical legend.
Yeah,
Like
it
Boone
does.
Pickens.
There's a lot of legendary game wardens in Oklahoma, and he obviously is one of them.
Wow. So that's great that he was honored. Now, we actually have a memoriam here at the central office, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is correct, yeah.
So if you come up to visit sometime, you can see some of our fallen game wardens.
Yeah, that's correct. Game wardens they have a long history with Oklahoma. In fact, they're the very first state law enforcement in Oklahoma for many years. In fact, Oklahoma, when it became a state, the first law enforcement, of course, was state law enforcement was game wardens, but their office was right next door to the governor at the Capitol back in the old days. Yeah.
Sure.
Very unique.
That's sort of, it shows our legacy of, the outdoors here and
Absolutely. Very rich history.
great hunting and fishing and wanting to protect that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Wow, that's amazing. So, Joe, tell me, how long have you been a game warden now?
So this is my 20th year as a game warden. So, yeah.
When and where were you when you decided, you know what, I'm going to become a game warden? How did that work out? So,
Well, that's a long story, Darrin. Don't know how far back you want to go, but out of as a kid growing up, I loved to hunt and fish. I was lucky enough to have parents and grandparents that enjoyed the outdoors and shared that with me and kind of instilled that in me growing up. And, that kind of led to the love of the outdoors. When I was a kid in high school, I still the same way, loved to hunt and fish and that sort of thing. I was a little undecided on what I wanted to do, like many kids are nowadays, And my father was a fireman, and I kind of grew up around the fire station and that sort of thing, and got to know a lot of the local police officers and stuff there. And one thing led to another, and I joined the fire department as a volunteer when I was 18, and me and a buddy of mine, and started our public service there. And I got, like I said, got to know some of the law enforcement guys there, and they kind of got the law enforcement bug, I suppose. And in October of 1997, I became a patrolman at the local police department there, and I was hired on and did that for a few years there. But it really didn't fit me driving around the city streets in that small area, And
now, where were you at?
So I grew up in Nowata County.
Nowata.
Yeah.
Okay.
Small town, USA, but the local game warden there was a friend of the family, and he told me one day, he said, "You know what, you should go back to school." At the time, I had an associate's degree, and he said, "You need to go back to school and get your wildlife degree, and you need to go to work for us. You'd be good." and Jeff Brown, which was
Oh, wow.
one of the legendary game wardens from up in the Northeast. And I said, well, you know what? That sounds like a good idea. You know, I love law enforcement and I love the outdoors and that sort of thing. And it kind of just fit. And so, went back to school and got my degree and got hired on a few years after that. And the rest is what they call history. So,
no, where did you go to school at?
So I went to school at OSU is where I got my wildlife degree, degree in wildlife management there. So.
Yeah. Did you go to class with any guys that you work with now?
Oh yeah. There's a lot of folks that I went to school with here that still work for the wildlife department. Some that have come to work for the wildlife department and moved on and whatnot. But yeah, Ben Biggerstaff up in the 8th district. Marnie Loftus, she was in class with me some, and there were several. Ben Half, some of the folks that went to work here, and so it's kind of grew up alongside a lot of them. So.
Yeah, so we're going to go back a little bit. You grew up, you liked to hunt and fish, right? And then you became a firefighter volunteer, so you kind of understood that, and then you eventually became a patrol officer there for the city. Along that route, what did you pick up that's helping you now? There's
a lot of things during that time period that you learn, as far as serving your community and that sort of thing. There's a lot of sacrifice that deals with that. And there was a time there also where I was doing I worked for a big retail company and learned a lot of customer service stuff. Everything revolves around your customers and the people that you serve and things like that. And that falls right into line with any kind of public service as far as that goes. Yes, we may not sell a product or produce a product here at the wildlife department, but we do provide, or at least we try to provide, excellent customer service, to our constituents, which are really all the people of Oklahoma, and including and especially our sportsmen, hunters and fishermen. So, we provide a service for them. We manage the state's resources, and we are here for them. They have a question. All they have to do is pick up the phone and call us.
And so having that customer service, with your job, it sounds like you really need to have personal skills. I mean, being able to walk up and talk to someone, no matter their stature or where they are in life. And
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Communication is key.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, it's definitely, you need to be able to visit with people. That's for sure. So some of us are pretty good at it.
Well, that's good. And, I've heard, I've had friends that were in your law enforcement that said, once people respect me, know me, I notice my, the crime rate kind of goes, I say crime rate, but the poaching or whatever goes down, that people are not necessarily wanting to, it's not always about just the rules. It's about respecting me as a warden. And I don't want to let my game warden down.
Sure. And it's, as game wardens get their assignments and they go into these counties, it takes time. They spend time in the field. They get to know the people in their community, and that could be as simple as marking off a little area in your county. You go out and you check to see who this landowner is, who that landowner is. If you see somebody, fixing fence, stop by, visiting with them. You see a farmer come out of a gate, stop by and visit with them, and it's just making those contacts, proactively, not reactively. So of course, if you get a phone call, you take care of the phone call and you handle the situation. But proactively going out and making those contacts. If they don't know you, they're probably not going to call you. Unless it's just a dire emergency. But if you've taken the time to stop by and visit with them, and they know you, you know them, they're liable to shoot you a text and say, hey, there was this deal. It's kind of weird. Don't know if it's anything or not, but you might just letting you know. And a lot of times something like that turns into something big. I like that. It sounds like from what you're telling me, it's not just an us and them, it's an us. Oh, it's absolutely. It's always an us. Yeah. We're not just the game warden, which, a lot of people refer to us as, oh, he's the game warden or whatever. Well, we're members of the same communities, you know.
Yeah.
We go to the same stores, we go to the, you know, we attend the same churches, our kids go to the same school, the whole 9 yards. You know, we're members of the same communities, and we want what's best for everyone, just like everyone else. So
yeah. So hang on, I've asked Joe to give me some little tips. He may have a pretty good one here at the end. But before we get there, let's I'm going to ask him a question. He says that, you know, when I emailed him and I said, hey, Joe, I'd like to ask you about your quintessential bust or poaching incident that people really like to hear this story. And he gave me a good one, and you had a name for it. It was like Operation, what was the name?
So yeah, it was nicknamed Operation Eviction.
Operation Eviction.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about this case.
So like I was telling you, you know, something that may seem small and insignificant may turn into something big. And this is a prime example of that. So I had only been in Washington County for just a few years.
Now, Washington County, for those that may not know, that's northeast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Washington County is just north of Tulsa.
Okay.
It's a real skinny county there, roughly 10, 12 miles wide, about 60 miles long.
Oh,
so
wow.
It's kind of a unique county. So I'm assigned.
Taller than wide.
Yeah. So I'm assigned to it and a small portion of northeastern Osage County, as well as a home territory. I supervise from basically there all the way to the Arkansas line, a lot of the northern counties.
Oh, wow.
So, but this happened in Washington County. So I had a landowner call me, and just like many landowners will call you, and this particular landowner actually had a rent house on one of his properties, and they run cattle and whatnot, but there was a small rent house on the property. And he said he had been having some issues with the tenant, and he went by to stop and check on him, and he noticed a deer leg in the front yard, which if you're in rural Oklahoma and you were raised hunting and fishing and that sort of thing, it's not uncommon for a dog to drag up a deer leg every once in a while. You know, it's a pretty common occurrence. So, you know, it's not out of the, now granted that is, you know, wildlife and it's odd, but it's not necessarily out of the ordinary. So I told him, I said, well, you know, I'll swing by and meet with you and take a look at the deer leg, and we can visit a little bit. And it just gives you another opportunity, you know, to meet with one of your landowners. And so we meet and begin to talk and discuss, and he shows me the deer leg, and yeah, there was a deer leg in the yard, and there was some other, you know, remnants of what looked like to be a white-tailed deer. And he also told me, he said, you know, I'm having some issues with this tenant, and I'm thinking about evicting him. And I was like, okay, well, that's entirely up to you, you know, whatever you decide. And that's okay. And I said, well, do you mind if I look around here? And he said, no, we can look around anything. He said, do you want to go in the house? And I'm like, no, we don't want to go in the house if you're still living there. You know, that's not something we need to do. And so there was a barn. There was an open barn there next to the house, and the big barn doors were wide open, and walked up to the barn, and you can clearly see inside the barn was a rope and gamble, which is what you would use to raise and lower a deer and
For sure.
you know, skin it and that sort of thing. And it was hanging from the rafters. So that's kind of a clue. And you go to looking around on the ground, and you can obviously see where there was blood on the ground. And, and then there was you know, tools laying around there with blood and hair and stuff like that. And then you know, as you turn around, and there you find 3 different buck deer heads.
Oh, wow.
Cut off and laying on the ground. And then I told the landowner, I said, well, this is obviously going to be something bigger than just finding a deer leg in your front yard. I told him, I said, well, why don't you stay here? And I've got to go make a phone call and take care of some paperwork. And backed out of there and called the district attorney that I knew and let him know what was going on, and wrote a search warrant and called the judge in the county and met the judge and had him sign off on the search warrant, and came back with the search warrant, and we searched the property and found an enormous amount of wildlife that had been what we believed was illegally taken.
Yeah.
So it led to the subject, us confiscating cell phones and things like that. And that deer leg in the yard led to, I believe it was 106 wildlife violations.
Wow.
And so it just goes to show you. In fact, I think it may have been the largest wildlife bust, so to speak, in Washington County history. It's like 106 violations. And it was quite a case, but it all started with something as insignificant as a deer leg in a yard. So
wow,
you never know what these cases are going to, end up being. That's why you need to take every opportunity to meet these landowners. If it wasn't for him seeing a deer leg in the yard and having a problem with a guy, they may never called.
He clearly knew something was going on.
I think the landowner possibly did.
If the guy was fishing, they're like, or whoever it was, was fishing, they're just like, person, I want to kind of evict him anyway, but what's going on?
And that's why it was coined Operation Eviction after the fact, because the subject actually in that case, he was evicted, but also, he had gotten into some other trouble and ended up going to jail. So wow. So as a warden, and it sounds like this person got into other trouble. Most of our game violations, they're misdemeanors, right? Oh yeah. Yeah,
so,
all your game violations really are misdemeanors. They're like getting a speeding ticket or a traffic ticket, except that a lot of times they're very expensive as compared to a 10 over speeding ticket or something like that.
Yeah.
Taking game illegally in Oklahoma is a very serious offense, and the fines and restitution can get very expensive.
Well, and why I brought that up is, this was a misdemeanor for this person. It's going to cost them a lot of money, but that it sounds like that probably opened the door to other issues that this person was having anyway, and then that led to further charges down the line.
That particular individual, it comes to find out we weren't the only ones investigating.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so as a warden, you're oftentimes, you're having these people report a potential game violation. And so you go and investigate it. But a lot of times you find yourself working other cases and working alongside your fellow law enforcement officers in your county or your city. Yeah.
We can't do it alone. It really makes it tough. That's why it's important to make these connections with our local sheriff's offices and police departments and the highway patrol. We work great together. A lot of those counties are, we work a very rural setting. And so, backup may be minutes, hours away, depending on where you're at. And so, we try to back them up on calls when we can. They try to back us up on calls when they can. And it, we're all in this together.
Sounds like you're not doing the same thing every day. And it sounds like an adventure in some ways. If someone's wanting to have an adventure like that, that's a variety of life. So
if you enjoy law enforcement, you enjoy the outdoors, and you're a sharp guy or gal and do good in school, have the qualifications, you should apply. It's one of the greatest jobs there is. It really is. If you enjoy law enforcement work, it really is one of the greatest jobs there is.
Wow. And you go through a lot of different training. And you're constantly updating on your training as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You never stop learning. I don't care who you are. Whether you're someone who's just been hired on or whether you're somebody who's got 25 years on, you're learning something new all the time. You've always got to constantly sharpen the sword, they say. So if you don't, you get a little dull.
List me some of those trainings that, maybe when you first started 20 years ago that you wish you had that you're taking now. I'm sure that things change and.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So when you're new, you get all the basics. You learn how to drive and you learn how to shoot.
Yeah.
And you learn how to defend yourself through defensive tactics trainings and things like that. And those are things that you must stay on top of your entire career. In fact, we're required to go back every year and do trainings where we just kind of, learn and relearn and just brush up on all those things. And it's great that we do that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also good to think outside the box. And, times change. So the amount of technology has changed. And so there's different technologies out there that you have to learn about. And they take a look at things differently now than they used to. And what I mean by that is, there was a lot of time there where they wouldn't teach you a whole lot in academies on just self-care, for a matter of fact.
Oh, yeah.
Things like that. Law enforcement can be terribly taxing on you as the law enforcement officer, and it can be also very taxing on your family because you're gone away from home a lot. You're constantly seeing the worst often of what happens in the world, and you bottle that up, and you have to bring that home, you have to deal with it and that sort of thing. And sometimes that leaks out into your family life and stuff like that. And so oftentimes the officer is the first casualty, and your family is the secondary casualty of that. So nowadays we're really trying to focus a lot on that. In fact, the department now has a peer support program and things like that I'm fortunate enough to be involved with. And I think that's definitely moving in the right direction. Years ago that it wasn't really even brought up.
Of course.
So that's one of the great things that we see nowadays. So there's a lot of other great training also, Darrin. There's a lot of stuff they do now with forensics that's pretty interesting and very cutting edge. There's a lot of stuff that they do with body language and that sort of thing, reading people just to try to stay one step ahead of what's going on. And sometimes that's difficult, but training pays off,
Yeah. Wow. One of the ones that I've got to go spend time along with wardens is the water safety and just defensive around water. And you guys are around water all the time, and water's dangerous.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting. And I like what you said earlier about, making sure that you're taking care of yourself,
Absolutely.
If and as a servant, you're definitely a servant of the community. You can't serve others if your pitcher's not full. You can't fill up another person's cup if
true.
Your pitcher's not full. And that's wonderful to hear. Our wardens are taking that.
Yeah. Hats off to our administration for allowing us to pursue that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, got some tips? And it sounds like one of them might be self-care, but...
Well, yeah, absolutely. Self-care is definitely something that everyone should do, regardless of who you are and what you do.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. Let's see. A good tip. I was thinking about that when you emailed me, and I'm like, what would be a good tip? And if I had a secret or a tip, I guess, that I could tell anyone about hunting and fishing, and my tip would be this: just go.
I love it.
If you could just get out and get outdoors, try hunting, try fishing, whatever the case may be. If you could get out there and do that, that's you're going to learn a lot. And what I would say out of your time going outdoors is, if you will, when you get back home, if you'll just reflect on it. And what I mean by that is ask yourself a couple of questions.
Okay.
So let's say you go deer hunting. Never been deer hunting before. You go out. Well, depending on what happened that day, ask yourself at the end of the day when you get home, what went right? You might even have keep a journal. A lot of guys do that. And it's really cool to go back and read some of your journal entries if you're a hunter or a fisherman. What did I do right? Write that down. What did I do wrong? Write that down. And then ask yourself, what could I have done better next time? Or what should I do better next time? Those three questions. Ask yourself that every time you go fishing, every time you go hunting. And in the course of, a year, you should have a catalog of what to do and what not to do.
I love it.
So, yeah.
That's perfect. And I volunteer with scouts a lot. And after every one of our events, and the scouts run it themselves. If they've done it before, I help coach them up and kind of mentor them along that way. But they call it roses, buds, and thorns. They also call it, base camp, summit, and peak. But it's the idea that you're reviewing what you just did. What went well? What did I like? What did I do that I should have done better? And then what am I looking forward to? That's one thing I think sometimes we forget. I love that, Joe. That's perfect.
Yeah. And that's part of self-care, is reflecting on your day. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, what did I do? And it doesn't have to be hunting or fishing. It could be whatever it is you did that day. Just sit down and think about it. What did I do? What did I do right today?
It sounds like if you went hunting, the first thing you did that was right was you went hunting, right? So,
that's right.
Good. I need to go myself. Hopefully you've been out this season. And
I have not been hunting. Late waterfowl season. Maybe.
Okay.
I got out some during that, but no. As far as turkey season goes, I have not been out. I've seen a lot of turkeys. It was a great year for turkeys. Yeah. It was a great year for quail. Maybe one of the better years for quail that I've seen in years.
That's fantastic to hear. Mm-hmm. And it's fantastic to hear that people are having a good turkey season. Because I feel like, we had a slump there for a little bit. And from what I can gather, of course, it's what I see. It's not nothing scientific, but it sounds like our turkeys are coming back.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely so.
That sounds good. Well, thanks for coming on, Joe. I appreciate it. And I'm going to have you back on. I'm sure you've got other stories and other tips, especially self-care. That's a big tip in my book. And I appreciate you bringing that advice.
Well, my pleasure, Darrin. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, thanks for watching and listening. And for those that don't subscribe. Make sure you share this with other friends and family. And like what my good friend Joe says, get out, go hunting and fishing. It's probably the best thing you can do. Thanks. Bye.